Starting today's list is Brighton Damazanthe, a 34-year-old man from Zimbabwe who decided to traumatize his loved ones twice, first by dying and then by casually waking up at his own funeral. Brighton had been battling illness for months, so when he finally died, his family thought they were prepared. He was taken to the funeral home, stored in a mortuary fridge for 3 days, and everything was set for a peaceful farewell. But peaceful was the last thing anyone got. On the day of the funeral, friends and relatives gathered at Brighton's home to say their goodbyes. But as people filed past the coffin, something strange happened. Brighton's legs twitched. At first, his boss thought he was hallucinating. Then the twitching intensified, and gasps turned into screams. Panic broke loose. Mourners ran like they were in a zombie apocalypse. People tripped over chairs, flipped tables, and sprinted for the exits. You'd think the man rose with fangs and claws. But while everyone else was fleeing, Brighton's boss marched straight to the coffin, pulled off the funeral blanket, and called an ambulance. 2 days later, Brighton woke up on life support with no memory of being dead. When asked how he felt, he told reporters he felt okay, just okay, and believed he'd been given another chance. No big deal, just another day in Zimbabwe. Number 6. Marjorie McCall, the woman who quite literally rose from the grave because she wasn't ready to give up her wedding ring. It all started in 1705. Marjorie passed away and was buried in the local cemetery. But there was one problem. She was still wearing her expensive wedding ring. The family had tried to remove it before the burial, but it wouldn't budge, so they gave up and buried her with it. That turned out to be what saved her life. The same night she was buried, a group of grave robbers decided to dig up her fresh grave to steal the ring. They successfully dug up Marjorie's coffin and pried it open. But when they tried to remove the ring, it was stuck tight on her finger. So naturally, the next logical step was to cut off her entire finger. But the moment the blade touched Marjorie's skin, she shot up in the coffin and let out a scream. The thieves didn't wait to find out if it was a ghost, a curse, or a zombie. They ran like hell, leaving their tools, and possibly their souls, behind. As for Marjorie, she climbed out of her grave, dusted herself off, and walked home. When she knocked on the front door, her husband answered and almost had a heart attack thinking he was seeing her ghost. But nope, Marjorie was alive and well. She lived for years afterward and even had more kids. Coming in at number 5 is one of those stories that makes you question reality and whether some hospitals need to retake basic biology. In August 2022, 3-year-old Camila Roxana came down with what looked like a regular stomach bug. She had a fever and was vomiting. Her mom, Mary, rushed her to the doctor, who immediately referred them to the Salinas de Hidalgo Community Hospital. That's when things started going downhill. After struggling to find Camila's tiny veins where they could pass her drip through, the hospital staff threw in the towel and declared Camila dead from dehydration, leaving her devastated family to begin planning her funeral. But during the actual funeral, Mary noticed something strange. The glass covering Camila's coffin was fogging up, like someone inside was breathing. When she pointed this out to other mourners, they told her she was just hallucinating from grief. Then Camila's grandmother also noticed the girl's eyes were moving. When they opened the coffin and checked for a pulse, they found out Camila's heart was beating at 97 beats per minute. She was very much alive, but just as the family rushed her back to the hospital, her pulse dropped to 35. By the time they arrived, it was too late for the poor girl again. This time, she was actually dead from brain swelling. Camila basically died twice, once from dehydration and once from disbelief. Number 4 takes us to England in 1571, where Matthew Wall was literally saved by the clumsy men carrying him. During a deadly disease outbreak sweeping through England, Matthew Wall fell ill and was declared dead. The sickness was spreading so fast that people were dropping like flies faster than they could be buried. When Matthew died, his family moved quickly to arrange his funeral. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Matthew's body was placed in a wooden coffin, and 6 men were assigned to carry him to the cemetery for what was supposed to be a quiet, uneventful walk. Then came the best accident ever. As the men walked through the village, one of them tripped, and the heavy coffin crashed to the ground. Almost immediately, a terrifying knocking sound came from inside the coffin. The fall had woken Matthew up. He was alive and desperate to get out of the coffin. The men quickly pried it open, and dear Matthew climbed out, perfectly fine. He went on to live for many more years, and his family was so amazed by his miraculous survival that they declared a yearly Matthew Wall Day to celebrate it. Number 3. Gene Hilliard. This lucky 19-year-old nearly became a human icicle on a Minnesota night, but somehow thawed out just in time. On December 20th, 1980, Jean was driving through rural Minnesota when her car broke down. With no cell phone, no help nearby, and temperatures plummeting to a brutal minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, she had only one choice: start walking toward the nearest house. But the cold was so fierce it began shutting down her body step by step. Within minutes, Jean was literally turning into a human ice sculpture. When a neighbor found her the next morning, Jean wasn't just unconscious, she was completely frozen solid. Her skin was white as marble. Her body was so stiff that it made a hollow sound when they tried to move her. She had no pulse, no breathing, and the hospital thermometers couldn't even register her temperature because it was too low to measure. The doctors were convinced they were looking at a corpse, but they decided to try warming her up anyway, because hey, miracles happen. Hours passed, and then the impossible happened. Her heart started beating again, her breathing returned, and she opened her eyes. Jean fully recovered, suffering only minor frostbite on her toes. Number 2 is Timesha Beecham, the woman who came back to life after the hospital started prepping her for organ donation. In 2020, 20-year-old Timesha was found unresponsive at home in Michigan. Paramedics tried for 30 minutes to revive her, but eventually declared her dead. Her family was devastated. A medical examiner signed her death certificate, and her body was released to a funeral home. But Timesha wasn't done with life. Because she was an organ donor, doctors kept her on life support a little longer while they prepared to harvest her organs for donation. 10 minutes after they disconnected the life support machines, Timesha suddenly woke up. The first thing she did was move her arm and foot, then she coughed and opened her eyes. When nurses called her son Tim to tell him his mother was alive, he was already miles away planning her funeral. Velma made a complete recovery with no brain damage whatsoever, despite being clinically dead for 17 hours. Her organ donor card, which was supposed to help save other people's lives, ended up saving her own by buying those extra few minutes that made all the difference. We're ending with the chilling case of Naysai Perez, whose family heard her screaming from the grave and literally broke through concrete to try and save her. In 2015, Naysai was at home when she heard gunshots outside and collapsed. Doctors later believed it was a panic attack, but her deeply religious family thought something darker was at play. Assuming she was possessed, they called a priest for an exorcism. Nothing worked. She was rushed to the hospital, and doctors eventually declared her dead from cardiac arrest. Her family, heartbroken, buried her in her wedding dress inside a concrete tomb. That should have been the end of it. But the next day, her husband visited the grave and heard something strange, muffled banging and what sounded like Naysai's voice. At first, he thought it was just grief messing with his head, until other family members heard it too. Without hesitation, they grabbed hammers and shovels and started breaking through the tomb. When they finally opened the coffin, they found shattered glass above her face, scratches on her forehead, and bruises on her fingers. Clear signs Naysai had been alive and desperately trying to escape. They rushed her back to the hospital, still in the coffin, praying it wasn't too late. But it was. She had suffocated to death. And with that, we've come to the end of today's video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure to check out the channel for more interesting videos.